Hello, everyone. I'm very honored to be here. See if I can remove that. To be in front of such great people. We have an index on Technion. It's a Johan versus female CEO ratio. It's 4:4 at the moment. It's not good. I want to just emphasize this because today is the International Women's Day. If you look around in the room, we need to do something about the financial sector as well, I guess. Just think about that and your mothers today. Technion is a compounding company group, and what we do is that we try to identify and acquire smaller industrial-driven companies, and we do that mainly in the Nordics, mainly in Sweden. But we, as I'm gonna talk about a little bit later, we also last year managed to acquire our first companies abroad. What we do is we are growing both organically in the companies that we own, but mainly we focus to identify and acquire new companies all the time, and we do this on an eternal horizon. We don't have an end game on this. We love it so much, and we want to do it forever. We spend a lot of our time, most of it awake at work, and therefore it's very important for us to try to have fun. It's not fun every day, of course. We do a lot of hard things at work, but we try to take care of each other and make sure that we are always have a bright view of the future together, not as individuals. We're much stronger as a group than every individual by themselves. At the bottom of this slide, I write that we are in the beginning. I constantly have that feeling. We've been doing this for a while now, but still, we make the steps we make every day, and we try to improve. We have the philosophy that we need to make small improvements every day, even though they're really, really tiny ant steps. We do them all the time, and therefore, since the change that we perform is looking, it's slow. Therefore, it still feels like we just started, but we've been doing this since 2006. And we are, the first couple of years, we did it totally organically. We didn't take any money in. We just acquired companies from our own generated cash flow. And after the financial crisis, we'd been doing the same up until 2019, where we were listed on the Nasdaq First North, and we raised some capital, so we increased the acquisition rate because we needed all those years before that to train. This is, when I look at this is something that you need to constantly train to be good at. And we didn't know when we were 5 companies how we were ever going to manage 10. And when we were 10, we didn't have any idea on how we were going to be manage 20. And now we are a little bit about 20, and hopefully I can stand here in 5 years and we are many, many more companies. That's the plan anyway. And how we're going to manage that and scale that, I don't know, but I know that we are very eager to learn and constantly improve our operations. Oh, I wrote it there. And I said I'm going to come back to it, but we managed to buy a company in England, and it's a fantastic little family firm. It's the 3rd generation. CEO is the seller, Daniel. He's hanging on as the CEO of that company within Technion now. They are manufacturing bespoke car transport cars. Fantastic. Go to their webpage and look at their products. And we also have a company in Ireland, Reward Catering, that manufacture food trailers, the best looking food trailers in the world. Customers like McDonald's, Four Seasons, LVHM, prestige customers. They just started selling to PGA golf courses. And if you sell to one, the next one, the neighbor golf course, want to buy something bigger and better and more expensive. That's great for us. This is our history. You see in the beginning there, we were growing rather slow, and then we got more confident, more knowledge, and more people in the head office, and now we can grow a little bit faster. We don't chase sales, we chase profit. Sales anyone can get. You just pay more or you give away things. But to earn money, that's the hard part and that's the fun part. And that's how we should be evaluated. This is the head office. It's me and Marie in the middle. We've been doing this together since 2008. In 2018, we got some colleagues, Mona, Anna-Karin, Håkan. They are what other companies would call business area managers. They make sure that our CEOs are happy and full of energy, so they can make sure that their co-workers are happy and full of energy. Then we have Daniel. He's here with us today as well, if you want to talk to him in between sessions. He's the CXO, which means that he takes care of all the scouting and more or less all the cold calling to entrepreneurs to see if they're willing to sell their life's work to us. And since a couple of months, we're also very happy to have Carina Strid on board as the new CFO. She's also here today if you want to talk to her. Our financial targets, we have 3 financial targets that we try to live by. The first 2, the stability one, make sure that we will never have a weak balance sheet. We have the net debt to EBITDA today approximately at 1.2. We like to be around there. We have the target, as you see, at 2.5. We don't like to be close to that. Stability should always be in place. We didn't have that in place in 2008. That was not fun. We don't want to be there again. Profitability, of course, everything we have within the group should generate money and cash flow. And in order to make sure that that's happening, we have this margin target to make things easy and understandable. And then the most fun target is, of course, to generate shareholder value. And we think we do that by just increasing the earnings by share. And we have the target in a 5-year ratio, so we want to double it every 5 years. We don't want to have 15% per year because we don't want to be short-term. And we also want to inspire you, if you want to become one of our investors and shareholders, understand that we do this with a long horizon. We don't want to be forced to make poor decisions in a single year if we can wait and do a better decision the next year. This is how we fulfill our financial targets. And the happy one you see to the far right, we are well above the target of doubling the earning per share every 5 years. What we look for when we look for acquisitions, we look for small, meaning companies that turn around from approximately 50 to 150 million Swedish krona. Very profitable, really high margins, very niche products. We almost always look for companies that sell some sort of physical product. It's something and it should be something that we understand. We want to be able to, with a little bit of training and a little bit of getting to know the people within the company, we would like to be able to come into that company and actually work there. We want to understand it. Why we want to do that? Because we think then after a while we can start helping them with strategic questions if we understand the business. And that's very important for us because we want our subsidiaries also to survive for 100 years, not only Technion. We bought 4 companies. I mentioned 2 of them. We bought 4 companies in 2022. I mentioned 2 of them, really lovely companies. The other 2 are equally lovely. Teltech in Örebro is designing and manufacturing check weights. It's something that when you weight your food in a production line, so it's always the right amount of weight in that product. It's really a very special product and more needed all over the world. We sell to more or less all over the world with Teltech. And then we acquired Lundahl Transformers, which is a lovely little cute factory in Norrtälje in Sweden, where they more or less from raw material manufacture transformers for the audio nerds around the world. Really high-end, very expensive stuff. We love that as well. How is my time, guys?
2 minutes left.
Maybe I can do this. Fantastic. We mainly it's me and Daniel that do all the fun bits of doing the acquisitions and building relationship with entrepreneurs that hopefully over time would like to sell their life's work to us. We meet together approximately 100 companies or entrepreneurs every year. We buy approximately 5. So there's a lot of companies that we don't buy, but that we love anyway, because it's so inspiring to meet all these people that has put so much effort and time into building something that is so looking good, so good from a distance anyway, when you look at the financials and what they do. So we would like to take time and come and visit them. There's so many good companies out there. We will never run out of good companies. There's always new companies. There's always evolving companies. I mentioned earlier that we would like to have fun at work as often as possible anyway, and that's, for me, it's the main reason that we went abroad and started buying companies, because we wanted to try, we wanted to learn, we wanted to broaden our knowledge about is entrepreneurs thinking the same way, is the same type of culture outside Sweden. The answer so far is yes. The language is a little bit harder for us, but as we decided to go to England, at least you hear how I sound in English. It's not very good, but it's enough at least to understand each other when it comes to doing business. And we think that we don't want to be more broad in the near future. So if we're going to buy more abroad, which we'll see, then we'll do it in the British Isles and Ireland, because we want to plant more flags there. And even though it's fun to go abroad, it's also something that will strengthen Teqnion's robustness. We will minimize the risk by being situated in more geographical markets. I started rambling a little bit, but I missed the time, but sorry about that.
Pretty spot on timing, actually. So, to start off, you mentioned that you started in 2006.
Yeah.
So can you elaborate a little bit on how did your M&A strategy evolve over the years?
Broad question, like it. First, it was really easy because we had no money. So we could only buy what we could afford. So the most important rule, if you're going to build a group like this, to become what's now known as a serial acquirer, buy quality companies. That's what you should do. That's rule number 1A. Never deviate from that. We were young, naive, and we believed so much in ourselves and our superiority when we started out that we thought that rule doesn't apply to us. So we bought what we could afford, and that was not quality. Don't do that. So we don't do that anymore. It was a good training, though. And I mean, the best tip if you're going to build a company group, I think the best tip to become successful in it is to actually work within these small companies with operations, to see the customers, to see the coworkers, to see the suppliers, to understand all the troubles that you have if you're going to build a successful small technology-driven company. If you buy poor companies, you have to do that in order to make them profitable. So you have to be there and spend a lot of time with the people in them. And that's a really good school, but it's nothing that I would suggest because it's very time-consuming and energy-consuming, and I wouldn't do it now when I'm turning 50. I could do it when I was 30.
Right.
So sorry, I didn't answer your question fully, but so over time, when we learned it, what we already knew from our inspirational sources back then, which was AdTech, Indutrade, they said, buy quality companies. And we said, yeah, we know, but we're a little bit better. We can do turnarounds. And we did turnarounds for a few years. And we learned that you shouldn't do turnarounds. So we stopped doing that, but we had very little cash. So we could only buy really small quality companies, which is not as quality as large quality companies.
Right.
So we started buying small quality companies and trying to make them bigger, continuously being quality companies. But as we grew and had access to more cash, we could buy larger quality companies. So that's more and more what we're doing today. Sorry, now I stop.
Great.
Yeah.
Now, Chris, you own Technion, so you're probably a lot more
I've already asked
qualified.
them, everything, but maybe for the benefit of the group, in your talk, you mentioned you went abroad and see what you could learn. So maybe, what did you learn about acquiring companies in the UK versus Sweden? What's differences and challenges?
The jurisdiction is much more hard to penetrate.
Yeah.
The agreements are much thicker, and in English it's hard. But otherwise, the people and from what we've seen, the culture within on how you do business and how you building a culture within the company, it's very similar. You take care of each other. You value your long-term relationship with suppliers and customers. And yeah, I'm so happy that it is like that. If you're going to build a successful company, you need to address the cultural thing, the soft values. You have to embrace your coworkers and make them happy. Then they start generating money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have interesting views on that, the cultural fits and all that. So maybe, talk about how you maintain a culture, acquiring so many different companies, and how do you maintain it?
I don't know. Well, we try to be honest, and we value loyalty and honesty, which means that we have to be examples of that all the time. And if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember what you've told, right? So when it comes to what's really interesting, if you fill a room like this with our CEOs, our subsidiary CEOs, really soon when they look around and they get inspired by all their co-workers or colleagues in that group, they start to fantasize about how they should build a big company, not 25 small autonomous companies, because that's what people do. They tend to build a clan. They want to stick together. So if you ask them, if you would ask that question to that group, they would say, yeah, we should ask Johan and Technion and the head office on how we should build a good culture. And then we should make a Technion culture with all these 24 companies as we have today. And then I have to step in between and say, no, no, no. We demand from you that you create a good culture, your culture at your workplace. It's not a Technion culture. It's your responsibility as a leader to make sure that people enjoy being with you. That's your culture. It's not a Technion formula. The formula is that we demand from you as a CEO to create that. If you don't do that, we will remove you.
Great. I think it was all the time that we have for the individual Q&A, but we're not done yet. We're going to have a panel discussion, and we'll be back shortly with both you and Johan Nordström from Green Landscaping. Perfect. So as an introduction, Johan from Technion, you already elaborate a little bit on, what are the critical factors in terms of culture? Because I think in general, people throw around the word culture without really knowing what it actually means. So Johan from Green Landscaping, can you just briefly define, what are the most important cultural aspects that you look at when you consider acquiring a company?
Well, going back to the previous speaker here who talked about the local culture, and we don't have a green culture to begin with. Even though you get the question, should we have the same culture? Should we have the same buzzword internally and so forth? No, each and one of the companies within the group have to nurture and foster their own type of culture. That's critical, because otherwise it kind of just becomes a big company, and then you can't claim that you're decentralized anymore. Then you are walking a very slippery slope from my perspective. Then when you look upon what type of companies do you acquire, when you we look clearly upon profitable companies. We are searching for individuals who really understand their business. They understand why they are making good money, and that's what we are looking for. And once you have come to that conclusion, then you start looking upon the individuals per se. And there are some commonalities, because if you run this type of business, we use the word trust a lot in our business, because it comes down to, do we trust these individuals to do the right thing when it's needed? It's not only about making money and that type of thing. They have to be sound individuals individuals. And that's a really strong criteria you have. So we look for commonalities. Yes, there are some basic stuff. We talk about decency, we talk about making money, and we talk about trust. But in terms of the individual culture in the individual businesses, they have to nurture and make sure that there's a strong culture inside each one of the companies.
Got it. And Johan from Technion, you already talked about it a little bit. It doesn't necessarily need to be the same culture as at the head office. But there's always this bias, right? We tend to like people more that are like ourselves.
Yeah.
So can you just talk a little bit about, what things do you do to kind of avoid these biases, so to speak?
I've made so many mistakes over the years trying to force people to become something that they are not. If I don't know if I'm one of them, but at least I like when things happen. If we see an opportunity, I want us to address that and take advantage of that. And if we have a company where I tend to see a lot of possibilities and that CEO doesn't seem to see that, many years ago, hopefully, it was many years ago, I started to coach them very closely. Coach is a too nice word here, but push them to take care of these advantages or opportunities or whatever. And not all people are worked like that. So if they are running a company with a good culture, always generating cash flow into the Technion build, and they seem happy and their coworkers seem happy, and it's always an increasing amount of cash flow every year from that company, even though that I think, or one of my coworkers at the head office think that we could double that in 2 years. Right. We don't do that. We let them be good at what they're good at. So I mean, it's very hard for some, maybe for me, to understand that diversity is something that's really good and build these groups strong. You can have some people that in leading positions that really want to take over the world. That's fine, but then you have to maybe put boundaries on them a little bit so they don't risk anything, but they also have a place. We have them in our group. They want to constantly take every opportunity and grow their business and just expand. If they do that within our framework and doesn't risk anything real, they are allowed to do that. Some people are really happy with just building something that's solid. If you look at their curve over the years, it's just steadily growing as a very solid machine. And then we let them do that. This I didn't understand in the beginning, like 18 years ago. Then I was on everything and just wanted everything to lift and take off.
Very interesting. Johan, anything to add in that regard?
Yeah, it's a slightly different angle to it, but I think to some extent, there's a natural tendency of corporations as they grow that they become more centralized. And that's a slow, painful death to companies like us. So you have to actively work every day towards keeping, if you use the word decentralized, you have to actively work against the trend of becoming decentralized, because it's so easy. You have the financial side of it, where you have the accountants. Well, wouldn't it be so much easier if we all worked in the same type of ERP or MRP system?
The banks would love it.
Everyone, the investors community, I always get those questions, and it kind of, yep, it's easier, but it's not good for business. You have to make sure that you kind of protect the individual companies, and you have to eagerly protect the decentralized strategy. And I would like to go so far to say that even my board doesn't really fully understand it. Some of the board members do it, but if you haven't worked in a company for quite some time where you have this setup, it's a learning curve that is quite long. If you look upon it in the beginning, you're basically going to say it will never work. But once you have done it for a number of years, you actually understand how it works. It starts to grow down there, and then you just have to let it grow. That's the way to do it. And then you remove the obstacles that is negative to that organic growth or the organic development of those individuals and the companies you have. So when you talk about simple structures, would it be easier? Or if you talk about it's a strategic move, that's dangerous. And you have to stay away from those decisions, even though it's hard, in order to make sure that the CEOs have a full, or the managing directors, as we call them, have a full mandate, and they should feel that it's their company. If we want to do this, then it's within our power to do it. And yes, it's a constant battle that you have every day, just making sure that they can grow their business the way they want to grow the business.
Got it. Chris, anything new?
Sure, yeah. I was wondering how you use financial incentives and financial targets and how that plays into kind of getting the outcome you want along with the culture. So maybe you both have something to say about that.
Yeah. First, we have to understand that the managing directors and some of the key employees, they have sold their companies or sold their businesses. And prior to that, they have been running the business as entrepreneurs for a long time. That means they are financially independent to begin with. So all of a sudden, when they have an employment contract, which they typically never had before, and you have to, it's a different way to work with them. So we talk about pull systems and push systems. And that means you cannot push them anymore, because if you are starting to do things they don't concur with, then all of a sudden they are not interested. They are getting motivated from other things. And that is really about, they really like making money. They like to be part of a journey. They want to have, we are a public company, we are growing, we are making good business, it's a success story. They want to be part of it. We have very good managing directors within our group. They, in turn, it's like a good team. They attract really good players to come on board. And that's the process. Then, of course, they have a salary and so forth. But compared to their private bank account, that is kind of, so you don't work from that perspective. We do have bonuses, we have a market salary and all that type of thing in place. But the big thing is really that they want to be part of the journey. And that's what you have to find out again, that's a crucial part of it. Otherwise, if you are acquiring a company, you gave them X amount of money, 2 years after the lock-up period is gone, then they're going to quit. They don't. And that's how you run the business. You have to make sure that they are motivated and stays for a long time with the business.
Totally agree with you. Please explain to everyone here that that's very much more important than monetary incentives.
It is.
But we have monetary incentives as well. You need both soft values and money. And what we do is we have a share. Profit share construction. So after every year, if they increased their earnings from the year before, they get a percentage of the increase. So that's how it's constructed. So it's not on top line, it's not on something else. It's just very clear that it's on one key number, and that is you increase your earnings every year. You will get a small percentage of that as a salary. Otherwise, we try to make their salaries as a fair market price, so they want to stay anyway, of course. And I think, as Johan mentioned, you understand we have two Johans here. Yeah. We have to do something about that. But I think that if we want to get everything out of these fantastic entrepreneurs that we have bought their life's work, right? And they stay on. Why do they stay on? I think, as Johan mentioned, if we're gonna start to push them or tell them what to do, of course they just go and play golf.
They're going to do something else.
Definitely. So what we have realized is when we pay them with cash. We don't force them to buy any Technion shares. We don't pay anything else. We just pay cash. And we've seen that we, by that, just unload on their invisible burden of having to own a company and everything that comes with that. So they get a little bit taller and lighter when they sold their company. And some of them get re-energized. And many of them, this is the true story, many of them have come to me when they're now employed, maybe for the first time in their life. They come to me, I don't understand it. I never worked this hard before. And I say, I understand it, because you're a solid person and you sold your life's work and you want your life's work to generate even more than you said. You want to over-deliver on what you sold. That's the type of person you are. That's why we bought your company.
I think it's quite similar to us, because we're looking for the same, and we end up in the same situation, that you talk to an entrepreneur, and typically if they are around 45 to 50 years of age and that type of thing, they want to do something else in life, so they're searching for something which they don't have the answer. And being a part of the group and continue the journey is a part of that answer, so to say. So we really have the discussion about their development as human beings, what they're going to do when they are 55 plus, what's going to happen to them. And we actually give them a place because to some extent they have been running the businesses for 20, 30 years, and they are kind of, I won't say they are getting bored, but if you have been in a construction meeting or whatever you have at 6 o'clock in the morning for the last 20 years, you won't be that excited doing that. But if you can offer them a future, they can still be part of the journey. You can make sure that you have a new manager coming in, taking over that business. They can still be the chairman of the board. They can still contribute. They can be a project manager. So you can actually keep on the talented people that built the business. And that makes sure you have the same culture, but you also can gain their experience, and you have younger individuals who comes in and they can learn from these guys who are still in the business. So you really have to get those individuals happy. You have to find them a place because they are looking for something, and we kind of have the answer to what they are looking for, even though they do not know it. And that's also a responsibility as we see it, that once you buy a company, for us, it kind of takes about 3 years for the entrepreneurs to find themselves at home in a new situation. Yes, I sold the company, but I'm still very much interested about the employees. I'm still interested about because if you are in a small city, you have the kids in the same schools. How does that look? How am I taking care of all the employees? And I even have relatives working in the business. So that's a huge responsibility for these entrepreneurs. So even though they sold the business, they are still in charge of the business, and they still feel they have a very strong responsibility for the success of their businesses. So they still look upon it as it's my business, even though we sold, in our case, 80% of it, because it typically stays with 20% shares, but in green.
Right. And actually related to that, recently I read an article about Salesforce, and without dwelling too much, for example, during more ebullient times, they bought like a, I think, wellness resort for their employees. Now it's tougher times, and the culture has totally changed. So can you talk a little bit more about how do you build a culture that lasts in good times, but also in bad times?
Maybe not to change how you act and what you say. Right. Just if you're going to change, do it over 10 years, slowly, in really small steps. Because I mean, as I mentioned a little bit in my presentation, we don't know how to run 50 companies. We run 24 now. But I'm pretty confident that when we have 50 companies, I'm going to stand here and tell you how to run 50 companies, because we are very eager to learn constantly about these things. And for us, culture is it's the concrete that holds us together. I guess it's not one recipe on how to do this. You have to just mix and match and taste it. Is it good? Now we need a little bit more of this. I mean, we do the wrong things. Last year we missed out on nagging our CEOs about increased prices. Make sure that you have a good view on interest rates, that you have a good view on the level of the dollar compared to the Swedish krona. And we missed those things because we came from a period of really solid financial status, right? Money was for free for a period of time, and we were getting sloppy. And I get so angry with myself because we know that you always have to nag about these boring things. Not nag maybe, but coach and inspire people to do the right thing. And we missed that for a little bit. And then you see, it's easy to drive into the ditch if you don't keep the culture in front of you all the time. If you call this is a part of the culture, right, to always be picky. We can never be sloppy about these things. The things that makes us sustainable over eons of time is that we always going to generate cash flow. And we can't generate cash flow if we don't have good margins and pricing power. And we need to have leaders that understand that this is the case. And we have leaders that want to win battles, that want to just conquer and win battles constantly. But the most important thing when it comes to culture is, can I even start a sentence like that? But very important thing about culture is we try to manage our subsidiaries by having board meetings, scheduled board meetings in every subsidiary 4 times every year. and we talk strategy in those meetings. We don't report in those meetings. We try to draw a map of the future for that subsidiary. And in that meeting, we try to push in energy into that CEO, into that leadership. So they feel that they get someone to bounce ideas off, that they get all this trust and that they deserve all that trust. And if we can manage to do that, they can continue giving that to their coworkers, which gonna give a really solid future for that company. So the most important tool when it comes to this is, I call it hugging. We go out to all our CEOs 4 times a year and we hug them as much as possible and fill them up and charge them with energy so they can do the same with their coworkers.
Great. Johan, you have anything to add? Especially I'm thinking about before you started your current M&A journey, you also had some turnarounds to do, so to speak. So how did you manage culture during those times?
Well, when you are in that situation, then culture is not the primary number one driver, because if you're not making money, you have to make sure that you're first making money.
Right.
And then it's a slightly different environment than what we're talking about here. Then it's more like, okay, this is what needs to be done. How do we execute on those plans? Once you've done it, because we started with Green, and Green had a revenue of about 750 million at that point of time. And then we did a full-scale turnaround of that company. And then we, to our great success, we acquired MaxService. It was a company with a revenue of about 850 million. They didn't make any money. So we had to make another turnaround, and then we had to integrate, and then we have to break them up into 10 different entities. And that's what we did, and that took us about 4 years. But that's a totally different exercise compared to what we're talking about here in terms of having the entrepreneurs and the right culture. We do have similarities in terms of the board meetings. We do have similarities that we should not be in the way. It should not be boring. So it's up to the local management, it's up to the board to take care of the business. And that's really what it's all about. And I think during your presentation there, Johan, you did mention about that if a CEO is not performing, you have to act quite quickly on that one. Because if it doesn't feel right, then make a decision, move on. That's what you have to do. And the sooner you do it, the better. Don't drag it out. Just get it done.
Good point. Just I have to break in because we stand here talk about this maybe soft values, culture.
Yep.
Don't mistake us for not taking action. We love action.
Yep.
But to be able to do that and to be best at doing action is that you have a good culture. Otherwise, people don't dare to do things.
Great. That was all the time we had for this great panel discussion, but thank you so much. And we'll have a short break, and then we'll be back with Berman and Beving and Magnus Söderlind, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.